Mr. Solomons, and thank you for your time on the PM News Desk.
Well, good afternoon to you, and thank you for having me.
Look, brutal crimes against children happening literally under our noses. We saw it with a little girl in Delft. We saw it with the East Rand father of five in Johannesburg this week. These are crimes in busy communities going unnoticed. Why is this, and how can we increase our vigilance in our neighborhoods?
Well, the problem that we do have is that children are quite vulnerable, and because they are powerless. Adults are supposed to take care of them, but unfortunately there are those adults who harm children, and there are those parents and caregivers who neglect children. So the position of children within society is what we need to deal with as well. And I think the issue of sexual crimes against children in particular is that in most cases it's the very people within children's own environments that are the perpetrators. So someone in the child's own home, someone living in the backyard, next door neighbor, down the street, within the same community that this child is living in. And in many cases, the perpetrator is known to the child. So children basically have a raw deal. Not only are they at high risk, but also the very people that are supposed to protect them are also their worst enemies and can harm them. So what we do see is that particularly in your highly stressed communities, the incidence of these kinds of crimes and human rights violations against children are quite high. So for example, within Delft and similar communities within Delft, where you have high unemployment rates, dysfunction, substance abuse, and huge levels of various kinds of social stress, which people also live in small shelters and accommodation. And this is basically a cocktail for disaster for children.
Mr. Solomons, it is important to remember that child sexual abuse, well, it does occur across the board in South Africa, regardless of economic status, how rich or how poor you are, race or background. In your experience, how challenging is this lack of coordination we're seeing between the three main response units, being the SABC, social services and pathology services?
I think in recent years we've had major improvements, and this has come about because of the reform of the child law framework, for example. We have better provisions in our legal system and also our criminal justice system and our child justice system concerning children. So we are seeing improvements, but I think there are lots of room for improvement and for better coordination. And also, as we also know, for example, things like cybercrime, for example, child pornography, there's still lots of space in terms of informing ourselves about exactly the extent of it, and also equipping ourselves to deal much better with these kinds of crimes. We also need to know that criminals often are very much aware about what their rights are and how they can sort of go around and cut corners, for example, and how to sort of go under the radar. And therefore our police services need to have continuous education and training so they can keep up to date with the modus operandi and the factors involved.
Patrick, it's actually easy to criticize the SABC, social services, etc. But, I mean, there's a problem here. They themselves experience a lack of funding and skills training to deal with cases of child rape or homicide. How crucial is it for us as a society that we start to cultivate within our very own communities a sense of active citizenship and personal responsibility for all our children?
I think parents are the main caregivers and the main protectors of children. And I think most parents in South Africa and caregivers in South Africa, they're doing a very, very good job. Unfortunately, there are some children that find themselves with parents and caregivers who's not doing such a good job. And therefore, society at large needs to step in, from your community workers and community organizations, your religious groupings and community, for example, is very important. Your arts and culture and your sports community is very important, right? And then, of course, all of these communities and also business is very important. Everybody needs to work together. And then, of course, also we need to see a government stepping in and also leading and creating a framework. And therefore, our president, who is at the highest level of government, needs to set the tone of priority for children. And all government needs to set a tone of priority. It's not only the police, it's not only social services, not only the health departments, not only the national prosecuting authorities. There's also other departments. Housing needs to set priority for children and to develop housing that is child-friendly.
Yes.
Our community development programs need to be sure that we develop communities that is child-friendly. Many of the makeshift and settlements that we're developing at the moment are not child-friendly. And I think this is a big problem that we are not addressing enough prevention strategies and that can possibly prevent some of these human rights abuse
Patrick,
happening to
like
children.
you're mentioning, parents, caregivers, they all play a pivotal role in this fight. But Stats SA reports that South Africa has one of the highest rates of what we call father absence in the world. Now, this is due to our history and of course, the migratory labor system, which gives us this painful legacy where children are left vulnerable in an unconventional family structure. With poor parenting. Well, the reality is that the majority of our children are not growing up in a fully functioning family structure. In a nutshell, Patrick, how do we get around this?
I think the important thing is that we need to begin to encourage adults, in particular parents, to take responsibility for children and communities to take responsibility for children. And then also we need to hold each other accountable. So accountability is key. We have to hold each other accountable. So if we see someone stepping out of line, treating children inappropriately, behaving inappropriately towards children, addressing children inappropriately, parents, mothers, fathers needs to speak to their teenage sons, their young adult sons, who often abandon their children, for example. We need to make sure that we bring our men into line and check them. So accountability is very important. We need to make sure that we can also hold government effectively accountable. And therefore, Molo Songololo believe that at this point in time, we need an ombudsperson for children at national level and at provincial level. And we do believe that an ombudsperson for children can assist government to identify some of the problem areas and also recommend to government how it can strengthen child protection within South Africa.
Thank you, Patrick. I'm afraid we are out of time. That was Patrick Solomons. He's the director of child advocacy group Molo Songololo.